Now
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 8:06, and we are all fired up and ready to blast through this 8 o'clock hour before we hand it off to Chris Plant. Coming up in 30 minutes, author Brad Thor will join us. His latest brand new summer thriller just released this week. It's called Deadfall. Always a great summer read and always a good conversation with Brad Thor. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Patrice Onwuka.
Happy.
As you know, Patrice, the truth
is out there.
That's where it is. And yesterday on Capitol Hill, we had a hearing about, what the kids used to call UFOs. Now they're UAPs. Listen to this stunning testimony.
In your belief, is this flying Tic Tac, I mean, is it capable of being the product of any other nation on the Earth?
No, like I said earlier, I think it defies current material science and the ability to develop that much propulsion. And I know there's been some physicists have done calculations, which is beyond anything that we have.
Can we stop with the flying Tic Tac thing? It makes it sound way too benign and cute, okay? This is it sounds a little more menacing than that. Also, one other constant theme we heard during these UFO hearings yesterday was this.
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries.
Let me just be clear, not the biologics part, the News Nation part. News Nation has been sort of the tip of the spear on covering this story, including some exclusive coverage with one of these whistleblowers. And the Washington correspondent for News Nation, Joe Khalil, joins us now. Joe, thanks for joining us.
Hey, great to be with you. Good morning.
So, good morning to you. So, could you sort of walk us through sort of the big picture of yesterday's hearings? Was anything was there an aha moment? Was anything kind of resolved? What's your biggest takeaway on what we learned?
So if you've been sort of following the story, there are certainly some people that are like more plugged into the, UFO news, UAP news. None of what we heard yesterday was exactly new, but the fact that all of it was said under oath in a congressional hearing setting was pretty historic. I mean, for the first time. And a couple years ago, I think a lot of these claims that were made yesterday in this hearing would have been laughed at in the halls of Congress. But, that's not what we saw. I mean, members of Congress, both sides of the aisle, everyone on that committee, and these are very serious members, asked very serious questions, took it seriously. And you had claims like you just heard that, the claim is that the government has in its possession a number of crashed UAPs, UFOs, that there has been this program to try to reverse engineer some of the technology, and that just given the actual pilots who have seen these things, and we're not talking about, random claims from crazy people that are made up, but we're talking about military pilots who are flying, who not only see them with their own eyes, but whose stories are now backed up by video, by radar. Military acknowledges these incidents actually happened. These pilots, sharing their stories, described how what they saw could not have been, as far as they understand it, made by humans because they seem to defy the laws of physics as we know them. And so, in other words, pilots describe seeing, these things move up and down and then stop and then hover in ways that like our planes are not capable of, and move at speeds that would kill a human pilot if it was actually in those craft. So a lot of, just really amazing things to hear in a congressional hearing.
Well, Joe, kudos to News Nation and to you for your coverage, for bringing this from a periphery conspiracy theory issue to something that's mainstream and in the halls of Congress. Seriously, just to go back to the three gentlemen that testified yesterday, three retired military veterans. I think what they lend so much credence, because why in the world would these retirees stake their entire career, their reputation, on claims that they know to be false or just made up? So, I think that lends a lot of credibility to yesterday's hearing and to the idea. I know Larry is not bought in, but I certainly am. What are you expecting to happen next, though?
Yeah. I got to say, too, I'm very skeptical about many of the claims we hear around these issues. But some of them at this point are kind of undeniable. And I mean, the Pentagon has come out and acknowledged some of these stories and said, yeah, something was flying. Yes, we don't know what it was. It is on our radar. So it's like, these are things that now some of these things we sort of have to accept because the evidence shows it. So next, I think what we're going to see moving forward are more hearings. The chairman of the Oversight Committee, James Comer, told me yesterday that there are going to be more hearings, likely field hearings. So they may not be in Washington exactly. They may be, near certain military bases or what have you. So I think that's coming next. There's also, we heard from another member of Congress, the possibility that Congress creates what's called a select committee on UAPs, meaning they would create an entire team, Republicans and Democrats, just dedicated to this issue to continue to hold hearings. And I think the last thing they're going to hear is one of the big whistleblowers who came forward to News Nation and testified yesterday, David Grush. They want to get him in what's known as a SCIF, which is, if you're not familiar, it is a private room in the Capitol where you can go over classified information. No phones allowed, no technology allowed in there. You got to check everything at the door. It would be just David Grush and then certain members of Congress, so he can talk about things he was not allowed to talk about yesterday in a public setting. He can do that in a private classified setting.
It's long been held, a belief by many people who are enthusiasts of this topic, that the federal government has known about this for decades, and they actually are taking advantage of this alien technology, sort of reverse engineering it for our own military and technological needs. Was any of that part of the testimony yesterday?
Yeah, it was. David Grush was asked, directly. And to be clear, these three witnesses, two military pilots, and then him, an Air Force intel officer, he's the only one who does not have firsthand knowledge. So in other words, he said, based on interviews I've done with 45 or 50 people, yes, he believes there is this program where the U.S. has recovered some of these, whatever was flying in the skies that we've seen on our radar, and that there has been efforts by the military and private companies to reverse engineer. Right. But again, he was never, in the rooms. But I thought it was really interesting. He said not only does he confirm, yes, this is happening, but he said he knows where these things are being held and done. And he claims he gave that information to the Inspector General. Right. And members of Congress asked him, well, can you tell us right now where they are? And he said, not in this hearing, but certainly in a private setting. In other words, that SCIF. Yeah. He said, I'll ready to hand that information over. My question was, why to Congress, if he gives you a location, why can't you just GPS it and go there and confirm this and yes or no and just, close the argument altogether?
Question.
It may be a little more complicated than that if these are like military bases or whatever, but presumably you can confirm that or shut it down, if someone's got a location.
Real fast, one other jarring thing that really sort of caught my eye yesterday, sitting in the front row just off center from the witnesses, was former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper. Now, last time I saw James Clapper in Congress, he was lying about the surveillance state, but that's another story. What was he doing? That was sort of a weird thing that the former DNI was there considering the sensitivity of this issue. That almost leads credibility, wouldn't you think?
I'm going to tell you something even weirder than James Clapper being there. That was not James Clapper. Everybody.
Oh wait, what? Are you serious?
Like him.
Oh no.
Yeah, it looked just like him. And we were all. I saw him walk in, and we all thought the same thing. My bureau chief, everyone said, "Is that Clapper?" I said, I don't know. It looks like him. So I walked right up to him. As you get closer, you realize it's not him. It's just a man who looks a lot like him.
Oh,
but
gosh.
I actually talked to that guy. He's a very nice man. His name is Ed Stanton. He was there.
Okay. Well, thank you. I don't want to peddle it. I'm so sorry. Yeah. I saw the picture. I'm sorry. That guy is okay. That's an alien disguised as James Clapper. It's the only explanation. This has got Men in Black written all over it. All right. Well, thank you for clearing that up, Ed Stanton. Boy,
No worries.
if you're gonna look like anyone, why would it be James Clapper? All right, Joe Khalil, News Nation. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Joe.
Of course.
Glad we
Good to
cleared
be
that
with
up.
you.
I hate doing that. I don't want to peddle misinformation. Hopefully,
But what if it is an alien dressed up at Larry? Now
Yes.
you're becoming a believer.
Exactly. I don't want to peddle misinformation, so let's just assume it's an alien disguised as James Clapper. That's better. 817. Let's get straight to Jamie Whitten and the Hadid.
WMAL. Making sense of the news.
Live
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
It's here. Download the new WMAL app and listen anywhere you go, anytime you want.
At one point, the judge asked the prosecutors, is there still an ongoing investigation? They said yes. She said, well, how can he plead guilty to part of an investigation when it's still ongoing? All of that, as you can tell, a lot of legal back and forth. It does look like things are back on track.
Until they were off track again. That was the middle of this incredibly dramatic day in federal court in Delaware, which was supposed to be sort of perfunctory. Hunter Biden shows up, he pleads guilty, judge rubber stamps everything, and we move on. But it turns out the judge had one very simple question. Is there still an ongoing investigation? When prosecutors said yes, the Biden team said, what? And when the judge said, well, will this grant immunity to the ongoing investigation and potential charges stemming from that investigation? The prosecutors said, no, there's no immunity for that investigation. And the Biden team said, that's not what you told us. And then the whole thing fell apart again. It was on again, off again, and it ended the day with Hunter Biden pleading not guilty to the charges that he was willing to plead guilty to. By the way, let me just point out, there's a couple of things that you need to remember and bear in mind here. One thing is very important. When news of this deal was leaked, or it wasn't leaked, it was sort of put out there.
Announced, yeah.
About a month ago. They didn't give us details, but the thumbnail of this plea deal was put forth. 2 days later, Hunter Biden was the guest of the President of the United States at a state dinner at the White House. He was hobnobbing with senators. He was rubbing elbows with the Attorney General that night. Let's not forget how blatant, how in your face, how brazen and shameless these people are. Another big takeaway from yesterday, the ongoing investigations, it appears, involves a FARA investigation. That is the law that Paul Manafort was thrown in jail for. If you are operating as a foreign agent and representing a foreign government or an entity in a foreign government and trying to get influence for them in the federal government, you have to register. Hunter Biden has never registered, even though he's made $17, maybe even upwards to $25 million from foreign agents. And if, in fact, there is a FARA investigation here, that confirms that he was acting as an agent for foreign governments. But more importantly, it points right to the Oval Office. Because if he was an agent of a foreign government making millions of dollars trying to get influence for those foreign governments from the U.S. government, it means only one thing, that he was trying to influence his father. That's the only reason you hire Hunter Biden as your representative. That means all roads lead to Joe Biden, as we've been saying, and that means the obstruction of justice that we're seeing from the U.S. attorneys, the attempt to do this ridiculous sweetheart deal that you would never be eligible for. Trust me, don't try not paying your taxes or not filing your taxes. You won't get a Hunter Biden deal. It's all because they're trying to cover up the bigger picture, and that is what Joe Biden was up to with all of this.
Well, you laid that out so succinctly, Larry. However, I wish the host of The View would be listening to WMAL right now, because apparently they've been living under a rock. They are totally clueless that there's any sort of wrongdoing, corruption on the part of Hunter Biden and potentially his father, the president.
Can I play this for everybody?
Please do.
If your news source is Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar, you're already in trouble. But listen.
Yes. What bribery scam? Yes. What? I'm sorry. It's so different every day. I mean, they're either freaking out about Barbie or they're upset about, Budweiser beer and
just Bud Light.
Bud Light. Bud Light. Okay. Now, right? That's right. You don't want the wrong thing to get out.
There you go. Yeah, they try to diminish it. They try to joke about it. I don't think Whoopi Goldberg is stupid, but she's playing stupid. And that stupidity then filters down to the audience. Oh, and then there's this.
And I think what is just terrible, and Anna said it the other day, they are weaponizing Joe Biden's son against him.
That's right. We've turned it
because obviously Joe Biden's son, who's Hunter Biden, an individual, can't make bad decisions and commit crimes on his own without his father's help. Now, obviously, one of the crimes we're talking about is using his father's access and his father's positions while in office. But they are what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, well, okay, there's an implicit admission. Yeah, there's something going on here, but don't make a big deal about it.
That's right.
Well, these are the very same people who have in the past told us, well, Joe Biden is great. His family, he's the adult in the room. He's why we need a calm, steady hand and a caring father, empathetic grandfather in office. Boy, every single scandal has poked holes in every bit of their narrative about the president.
Great point. They have told us, and of course the media never vetted this guy because as far as they're concerned, in his 50-year career, Joe Biden represents the best that Washington, D.C. has to offer. He is the perfect example of D.C. politics at its best. And you know what? They're right. It's 8:24. If you're having, I'm still kind of shook up over the James Clapper doppelganger that we just learned.
Yeah.
This guy who was at the UFO hearings in the front row, who clearly was James Clapper, we're told is not James Clapper, which means it's an alien in a James Clapper meat suit. I've just put it out on our social media so you can judge for yourself.
I mean, obviously, he could easily come up with a false identity in a second.
But
so
he's
maybe
James
it is
Clapper,
him.
after all. Coming up, Brad Thor.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
News now.
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
Yeah, if it's time for Parliament, it can mean only one thing. Friend of the program, personal friend, Brad Thor, New York Times bestselling author, and he's got his brand new summer thriller out, Deadfall. It's honestly my favorite stuff to read over the summer. He joins us now, Patrice. Brad, good to hear from you, my friend.
Larry, it's great to be with you. Good morning, Patrice. Hottest day of the year, and you've got the hottest book of the summer.
There you go.
Perfect.
Can I just say, and I can't believe I have to say these words, but for the first time in the 12 years that you and I have known each other, I am interviewing you about a book that I have yet to read. I feel awful.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Well, it's okay.
I feel
That's
awful.
Right.
I am so behind on my reading right now, and I don't know if you've noticed, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and I have not been able to kick back, relax, and enjoy my latest Brad Thor thriller. So I apologize, my friend.
Listen, that is totally okay, and this is something to look forward to. I mean, This is people plan their vacations around these books, so I get it. That's totally
there you
cool.
go.
So give us a thumbnail on this. What's the latest with Scott Harvath? What kind of trouble has he gotten himself into this time?
So I grew up reading great World War II thrillers like Alistair MacLean, Where Eagles Dare, which was also a great movie with Clint Eastwood and Richard Burton. And I always wanted to take my series character and place him into a situation similar to that. So when the Ukraine war happened, I said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have an American civilian trapped behind enemy lines. Harvath is going to have to secretly go in and battle to get this person out. The problem is that the Russian mercenary group, a detachment, a rogue element of the Wagner group, has grabbed this woman. And it makes it very difficult for Scott because the U.S. can't acknowledge that he's in Ukraine. They can't back him up. And so it's me kind of doing a modern version of Saving Private Ryan or Band of Brothers, that sort of a thing. And that's what Deadfall is all about this summer.
Which, by the way, brings us to your specialty, Brad Thor, which is faction, ripping stories from tomorrow's headlines. When the whole story of the attempted coup in Moscow took place, and it was the Wagner group that was leading it, I said on the air, I said, listen, I know everything I need to know about the Wagner group because I've been reading Brad Thor for the last 5 years.
And that's been wild to actually, instead of beating the headlines, be kind of in sync with the headlines on this book. And the neat thing is that there's two storylines. There's what's happening in Ukraine, And then there's also this really cool mystery happening in and around D.C. where someone has been found. They don't know if he was thrown off the top of a building about 8 blocks from the White House or if he jumped. And so there's a very interesting where the Russians doing something in Washington while Harvath was trying to get at the Russians in Ukraine. So it's kind of a neat parallel plot line there.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. I mean, listen, I like thrillers, but I don't have a lot of time to read them, so I'm looking forward to maybe diving into this one. But do you have any teases coming up, or is there something else that you're seeing in the headlines that you think might be a good fodder for a new book, a new piece of the series?
Anything going on with the intelligence community and the national security apparatus of the military that might inspire you?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, Patrice, my chapters are short, cinematic, very easy. I have people say that they're like Pringles potato chips. They can't just eat one. When they start, they all of a sudden realize a couple hours later the book's done.
Totally.
So
I can vouch for that.
Okay.
And the other thing is, knowing that Danielle Silva is a listener of this program, the last thing I'm going to do is tell you what's attracting me storyline-wise for next year's thriller. I wouldn't tip my hat here on WMAL.
Wow.
Forget it. I don't know if you're on the payroll, Patrice, for the Silva family, but come on.
That's hilarious. All right. Oh, man. Shots fired. All right. That's fair news. Listen, I do want to ask you about what's going on in the world. Listen, there are 3 different kinds of conversations I love having with Brad. One, what's going on in our personal lives, which we'll save for a bourbon, not for this conversation. His books, and then what's going on in the world. I know you revere the intelligence community. You have great respect for law enforcement. You have great respect for the military. And that's why, and as do I, and that's why I'm so focused and concerned about issues, problems, troubles with those agencies that deserve better leadership, I think. And a lot of your storylines over the years, Brad, have talked about bad actors within our government who use these institutions for all the wrong reasons. How do you think this is going to resolve what we're seeing play out right now?
Well, I'll tell you this. The majority of the people who work for our government are absolutely fantastic men and women, extremely dedicated to the United States, to upholding and defending the Constitution. So any organization, you're going to have some people who phone it in, who probably never should have been hired, that kind of stuff. That's natural in any large organization. I grew up with family and friends in the FBI. I am extremely pro Federal Bureau of Investigation. And I think we're living through a time now where it's, to a certain degree, it's like the Salem witch trials. Everybody sees stuff around every single corner. There's a conspiracy here, a conspiracy there. And I think we've got a lack of trust in institutions overall and a lack of trust in expertise. It's just this weird thing that we're going through. And we're very lucky that we have these people who dedicate their lives and develop expertise, whether it's at the Department of Justice, the FBI, the Central Intelligence Agency. I think we're in excellent hands, and I think there's too much wringing of those hands. I think we're going to be okay. In fact, I know it.
Isn't part of the lack of confidence in these institutions, though, Brad? I know how dedicated you were to the men and women who were fighting in Afghanistan and that effort against all odds over the couple of decades we were there. And you see the disastrous decisions made and how we pulled out in the horrific terror attack that left 13 of our service members murdered there in the final days. And no one's held accountable. In fact, they're still acting like that was a success. I mean, that serves to undermine our trust.
Yeah, so absolutely. We should always have accountability. Not a single head rolled after 9/11. So there's a culture of not punishing people for intelligence failures, and that's not okay. People need to be held accountable. So you can't just circle the wagons and protect people who need to, take whatever an appropriate punishment is for either missing something, not doing their jobs, whatever. So, yes, I agree. Accountability is very important. But we also we're so tribal now. We need to remember that there is blame to go around to the Trump administration. And one of my best friends was the national security advisor under President Trump. Yep. But, Trump was setting a timetable with the Taliban. Trump couldn't get out of there fast enough. Biden was, I'm not saying Biden did a perfect job, I'm not saying Trump did a perfect job, but I think it's only fair to say we had 2 administrations that let our service members down in how they handled Afghanistan and the withdrawal.
I'd like to think our mutual friend, Mr. O'Brien, would have handled things a little differently than this team, though. But And I think you're right, absolutely. Brad Thor, always great to talk with you. Meredith sends her best. We miss you. And again, I wasn't going to BS you and tell you I did read the book. I haven't, but I promise you I will by the time we speak again.
You're always a straight shooter. I appreciate that, and I know it makes Patricia's job so much easier this morning, Larry.
The book is Dead Fall, and it is absolutely flying off the shelves. So get on board. It's a great summer read. Dead Fall by Brad Thor. Thanks, Brad.
All the best, guys.
It's 8:44. A milestone was hit this week. Check it out.
Hi, today would be day 500 of being a girl if I was still keeping up with that series. But I found myself in kind of an interesting position because if I make the content that I want to make and freely share my trans joy, I subject myself to a lot more trauma. So lately I've chosen to scale back in order to protect my overall well-being.
Oh, good for you. There you go. Day 500. He's got to protect his well-being. Meanwhile, Bud Light is laying off workers across the country. Anheuser-Busch is restructuring their corporate offices. Sales have slumped. Hundreds of employees will now be out of work thanks to the wise choice of having Dylan Mulvaney sell Bud Light. But it's not hurting Dylan Mulvaney. Don't buy the hype that he's God, it's so hard dealing with all of this trauma. Dylan Mulvaney is a part of CAA speakers. CAA is the top most powerful agency in the world. High-powered CAA agency is booking Dylan Mulvaney for speeches for $40,000 a shot.
That is insane.
Dylan Mulvaney will show up and give a speech for $40,000 to your organization, your group. Here's the best part, Patrice. What is Dylan Mulvaney's speech about? Women's empowerment.
You have to laugh because otherwise you put your hair out. I mean, it's ridiculous that a biological man who's just dressing up as a woman, playing in woman face, is now making more than some women earn in an entire year by speaking about being a woman for 500 days. Well, so, this is 2023. This is what women's empowerment apparently looks like today.
Yeah. Listen, if you need somebody to speak about women's empowerment, hire Patrice Onwuka. Not only is she a star of morning radio in Washington, D.C., she testified before the Senate yesterday, and she won't cost you $40,000. Sorry, Patrice. I don't mean to undercut you, but it
not yet.
Won't be quite that expensive. And, oh, by the way, she's a woman. It's 8:52. All right, that's a wrap, Patrice. Great job testifying today. Or are you taking a break?
No, taking a break.
All right.
I need a breather.
Well, we'll talk to you tomorrow then. Chris Plant is next. No breathers for you.
No breathers. At least I'm not testifying before Congress, though.
That would be fun, though. I'd like to watch that.
That could be a lot of fun, actually. Yeah. That'd be a different kind of day at work, wouldn't it? Well, we got the Hunter Biden thing. It was more crooked than we ever could have imagined, and the judge called him on it. And the fix was in. Boy, it really is good to be senator's son and the president's son getting away with Moida. And UFOs are no longer UFOs.